March 1943. A German U-boat commander surfaces his vessel in the mid-Atlantic, 800 miles from the nearest land. It is a routine procedure. They have done it hundreds of times. Surface at night. Run the diesel engines, recharge the batteries, refresh the air, then dive again before dawn. The Atlantic belongs to them. The Wolfpacks have been sinking Allied ships faster than they can be built. American and British convoys are being slaughtered. But tonight, something is different. The lookout hears it first. A distant drone, aircraft engines. The commander is not worried. Allied planes have tried to attack U-boats before. The standard procedure is simple. Crash dive, get below 100 feet, wait for the depth charges. U-boats can survive depth charges. The explosives have to detonate within 20 feet to cause serious damage. Most of the time, they miss by hundreds of feet. The ocean is vast. Finding a submerged submarine is almost impossible. The klaxon sounds. The crew scrambles. The boat tilts forward and slides beneath the waves. 50 feet, 80 feet, 120 feet. The commander allows himself a slight smile. Another failed attack and another night survived. Then they hear it. A sound no U-boat crew had ever heard before. A mechanical whine, getting louder, getting closer, moving through the water, hunting. The sonar operator's face goes white. He reports a contact, an object in the water, moving independently, tracking them, closing distance. This is not a depth charge. Depth charges sink straight down. This thing is moving horizontally. This thing is following them. The commander orders evasive maneuvers. Full left rudder. Dive to 200 feet. The mechanical whine follows. It does not lose them. It does not slow down. It stays locked on their position. The crew can hear it now through the hull. A high-pitched whirring sound. Like a motor. Like a hunter closing in on prey. Then the explosion. The acoustic torpedo. The American Mark 24 mine detonates against the U-boat's hull. The blast tears through the pressure vessel. Water floods into 3 compartments simultaneously. The boat begins its final descent to the ocean floor. Of the 50 men aboard, none survive. This scene played out 217 times in 1943 alone. 217 German U-boats sank that year. It was the highest loss rate in the entire Battle of the Atlantic, and German naval intelligence could not figure out why. Their U-boat commanders were the best trained in the world. Their boats were technologically superior. Their tactics had worked flawlessly for 3 years, but suddenly, in 1943, surfacing became a death sentence. And the strangest part? The U-boats that were sinking were not being destroyed by depth charges. They were being destroyed by something else. Something that hunted them underwater. Something the Germans did not know existed. Here is what the German High Command was seeing. U-boat after U-boat reported being attacked by Allied aircraft. Standard procedure. Nothing unusual. But then those U-boats would disappear. Completely. No distress calls. No survivors. No wreckage. Just gone. And when they did recover wreckage, the damage patterns were wrong. Depth charges create a specific type of damage. They crush the hull from external pressure. But these wrecks showed focused explosive damage. Penetration wounds, as if something had deliberately targeted them and detonated on contact. German intelligence analysts studied the reports. They interviewed survivors from the few U-boats that managed to escape. They recovered debris. They interrogated captured Allied aircrews. And slowly, impossibly, they began to piece together the truth. The Americans had developed an acoustic homing torpedo, a weapon that could be dropped from an aircraft, enter the water, and then hunt submarines using sound. It listened for the noise of the U-boat's engines and propellers. It tracked that sound, and it followed the submarine until impact. The Germans called it the Wands, the Bug. The Americans called it the Mark 24 mine, though it was not a mine. It was designated a mine for security purposes. If a bomber carrying the weapon crashed, or if the weapon was recovered by the enemy, the classification as a mine would hide its true nature. But it was a torpedo, an aerial acoustic homing torpedo, the first of its kind in the world. Let me show you why this weapon was so revolutionary and why it terrified German U-boat crews. First, understand the context. In 1942, German U-boats were winning the Battle of the Atlantic. They were sinking Allied merchant ships at a catastrophic rate. In November 1942 alone, U-boats sank 119 Allied ships totaling 729,160 tons. The Allies were losing ships faster than they could build them. Britain was months away from starvation. The lifeline across the Atlantic was being cut. If the U-boats could not be stopped, Germany would win the war by strangling Allied supply lines. The Allies had two main weapons against U-boats: depth charges and conventional bombs. Both had the same fundamental problem: accuracy. A depth charge dropped from a ship or aircraft would sink straight down. It had to detonate within 20 feet of the submarine to cause lethal damage. But the ocean is three-dimensional. A submarine could be anywhere within millions of cubic feet of water. Hitting a moving submarine with a falling depth charge was like trying to hit a fly in a dark room by throwing rocks. Sometimes you got lucky. Most of the time, you missed of the time. Conventional bombs dropped from aircraft had an even worse problem. By the time the bomb hit the water, the U-boat was already diving. Submersion time for a type. The 7th U-boat, the most common German submarine, was 30 seconds. From the moment the klaxon sounded to the moment the boat passed 50 feet depth, half a minute. And once the boat was below 50 feet, it was nearly invisible. Bombs that detonated on the surface did nothing. The water absorbed the blast. But the Mark 24 changed everything. Here's how it worked. An Allied patrol bomber, typically a B-24 Liberator or a PBY Catalina, would spot a U-boat on the surface. The pilot would approach. The U-boat would crash dive, standard scenario. But instead of dropping depth charges and hoping for a hit, the pilot would drop the Mark 24. The weapon would enter the water. A parachute would slow its descent initially, allowing it to enter cleanly without damage. Then the parachute would detach, and the torpedo would activate. The Mark 24 carried an acoustic homing system, 4 hydrophones, underwater microphones, arranged around the nose of the torpedo. These hydrophones listened for sound. Specifically, they listened for the rhythmic thumping of a submarine's propellers and the whine of its electric motors. When the hydrophones detected that sound, they calculated the direction, and the torpedo's guidance system adjusted the rudder to steer toward the source. The torpedo cruised at 12 knots. Slow by torpedo standards, but U-boats underwater moved at only 6 to 8 knots. The Mark 24 was faster, and it didn't lose the trail. It followed the sound signature. Even if the submarine turned, even if it dove deeper, the torpedo tracked it. The U-boat could hear the weapon coming, that mechanical whine, that relentless approach, but there was almost nothing they could do. Let me paint you a picture of what this meant in combat. Imagine you are the commander of U-664, a Type VIC U-boat operating in the North Atlantic in August 1943. You have been at sea for 6 weeks. You have sunk 3 Allied merchant ships. You are a veteran crew. You know the risks. You know how to survive. You surface at night to recharge batteries. It is a moonless night. Good visibility. Your lookouts scan the sky. Nothing. You are safe. Then the radar operator reports a contact. Aircraft, bearing 240 degrees, distance 8 miles, closing fast. You sound the alarm. The crew knows the drill. The last man drops through the hatch. The hatch slams shut. The diving planes tilt. The ballast tanks flood. The boat angles down. You are at 30 feet, 50 feet, 80 feet. The danger has passed. Allied aircraft cannot hurt you down here. But then you hear it. A sound you have never heard before. A whirring noise in the water. Your sonar operator reports it. An object, moving, tracking, moving, tracking. You order hard to starboard. Emergency dive to 200 feet. The boat responds. But the sound follows. It is getting louder. Your engine room reports they can hear it through the hull. A mechanical hum. Like a small motor. Getting closer. You shut down the engines. Complete silence. Maybe it will lose you. But the torpedo does not need the engines. It can hear the auxiliary systems. The air pumps. The ventilation. The sound of 50 men breathing in a steel tube. The hydrophones pick it all up. The whining gets louder. Louder. Closer. Then the explosion tears your boat in half. This is what happened to U-664 on August 9, 1943. Sunk by a Mark II-4 dropped from a United States Navy PBY Catalina flying boat. All hands lost 50 men, and the Catalina crew had no idea if they had even hit. The Mark 24 attacks happened deep underwater. There was no visible explosion, no oil slick, no debris field. The air crews would drop the weapon, circle the area for a while, and then fly home. Only later, when German radio intercepts went silent, when the U-boat failed to report, would Allied intelligence confirm the kill. Here is the thing that made the Mark 24 so devastating. Secrecy. The weapon was so highly classified that even most Allied air crews did not know what it really was. They were told it was a mine. They were instructed to drop it in a specific pattern when attacking a diving submarine, but they were not told how it worked. They were not told it was acoustic homing. If an aircrew was shot down and captured, they could not reveal what they did not know. The Germans did not figure out the weapon's true nature until late 1943. By then, dozens of U-boats had been sunk by it. When German engineers finally recovered an intact Mark 24 from shallow water off Norway, they were stunned. The acoustic homing system was years ahead of German technology. Germany had experimented with acoustic torpedoes, but only for submarine-launched weapons. The idea of an air-dropped acoustic torpedo had seemed impossible. The impact with the water would destroy the delicate electronics, but the Americans had solved it. Parachute entry. Ruggedized components. Simple but effective guidance system. And here is what German U-boat commanders discovered that changed their tactics forever. There was almost no defense. You could shut down your engines, but that only delayed the inevitable. The torpedo could still hear other sounds. You could try to dive deeper, but the Mark 24 could follow to 300 feet. You could turn sharply, but the torpedo adjusted. The only reliable defense was to not be detected in the first place, and that meant staying submerged. But U-boats could not stay submerged indefinitely. They needed to surface to recharge batteries. They needed to run their diesel engines, and every time they surfaced, they were vulnerable. The impact on German U-boat operations was catastrophic. In 1942, before the Mark 24 was deployed, the average U-boat operational life was 11 patrols. By late 1943, after the Mark 24 entered service, the average had dropped to 3 patrols. U-boat crew morale collapsed. Sailors called it Himmelfahrtskommando, the journey to heaven, a one-way trip. The odds of surviving a single patrol dropped below 50%. The odds of surviving the war became statistically negligible. Admiral Karl Dönitz, commander of the German U-boat fleet, wrote in his war diary in November 1943 that the situation had become untenable. Quote, "The enemy has rendered the U-boat ineffective. He has achieved this with a new weapon, an aerial torpedo that homes on sound. We have no countermeasure. Our losses are unsustainable. If this continues, we will lose the entire fleet within 6 months." Let me give you the numbers that terrified German Naval Command. In the first 5 months of 1943, before the Mark 24 reached full deployment, the Allies sank 96 U-boats. That was already a high rate. But in the last 7 months of 1943, after the Mark 24 became operational, the Allies sank 121 U-boats. The loss rate had accelerated, and the Americans were producing Mark 24 torpedoes faster than Germany could replace submarines. By the end of 1943, over 340 Mark 24 torpedoes had been dropped in combat. The hit rate was approximately 37%. That meant that more than 1 in 3 weapons resulted in a U-boat kill. For an air-dropped anti-submarine weapon, that was an unprecedented success rate. But here is the thing that should terrify you from a strategic perspective. The Mark 24 did not just sink U-boats, it changed German behavior. U-boat commanders became afraid to surface. They stayed submerged longer. They avoided areas with known Allied air patrols. They became defensive. And a defensive submarine is an ineffective submarine The whole point of the U-boat campaign was to aggressively hunt Allied convoys. But if surfacing meant near certain death, the U-boats could not hunt. They could only hide. The Allies had done something extraordinary. They had turned the hunter into the prey. The U-boat, which had terrorized the Atlantic for 3 years, was now the one being hunted, and the weapon hunting them was almost invisible. A U-boat commander could not see it coming, could not hear it until it was too late, could not evade it, could not fight it. All he could do was wait and hope that the mechanical whine would not start. And when it did start, he had about 45 seconds to make peace with his fate. There is a moment that captured this psychological shift. In October 1943, a German U-boat commander named Heinrich Müller-Edzards, captain of U-boats U-590, surfaced in the central Atlantic to recharge batteries. His radar picked up an aircraft. He crash-dived. Standard procedure. But as the boat descended, his sonar operator reported the sound. The whine. The torpedo. Müller-Edzards did something unprecedented. He surfaced again. He brought the boat back up, opened the hatch, and ordered his crew to abandon ship. He chose to surrender rather than face the acoustic torpedo. The Mark 24 detonated against the empty hull. The crew was picked up by an Allied destroyer. When interrogated, Müller-Edzards explained his decision. Quote, "I have faced depth charges. I have faced bombs. I have faced destroyer attacks. But that sound, that hunting sound, I would rather take my chances in the water than listen to that thing hunt my boat." That tells you everything you need to know about the psychological impact of the Mark 24. A veteran U-boat commander, a man who had survived multiple patrols in the most dangerous naval campaign of the war, chose surrender over facing the weapon. Now, let me show you the tactical innovation that made this possible. Because the Mark 24 wasn't just a better torpedo, it represented a completely new approach to anti-submarine warfare. Before the Mark 24, anti-submarine tactics relied on saturation. Drop as many depth charges as possible in the area where you think the submarine is, and hope one of them hits. It was wasteful. It was inefficient. It rarely worked. The Mark 24 changed that to precision. One aircraft, one weapon, one kill. The pilot didn't need to guess where the submarine was. He just needed to drop the weapon close enough for the acoustic system to acquire the target. And the torpedo did the rest. This was the birth of what would later be called fire and forget weapons. Launch the weapon. Let its guidance system do the work. Move on to the next target. The impact on Allied strategy was profound. Suddenly, a single long-range patrol bomber could cover thousands of square miles of ocean and pose a lethal threat to any U-boat it encountered. Before the Mark 24, U-boats could surface, see an aircraft approaching, and dive with confidence that they would survive. After the Mark 24, seeing an aircraft meant potential death, and that changed everything. German countermeasures were developed, but came too late. By early 1944, German engineers had created the Bold, a device that released chemicals into the water to create a false acoustic signature. The idea was that the Mark 24 would home in on the Bold instead of the U-boat. It worked sometimes. But the Allies adapted. They trained air crews to drop multiple torpedoes in a pattern. Even if one was decoyed, another might still find the target. The Germans also experimented with rubberized coatings to reduce the acoustic signature of U-boats. But applying the coating required dry dock time that Germany did not have, and the coating degraded quickly in salt water. It was a temporary solution to a permanent problem. By mid-1944, the Battle of the Atlantic was effectively over. The U-boats had lost. Allied shipping losses dropped to negligible levels. Convoys crossed the Atlantic with minimal protection. The wolf packs that had once terrorized the seas were reduced to isolated submarines desperately trying to survive, and the Mark II-4 was a major factor in that defeat. Here are the final numbers. From 1943 to 1945, the Mark 24 was credited with sinking 68 U-boats and 18 Japanese submarines, but its psychological impact was far greater than the raw kill count. The weapon forced submarines to remain submerged, reducing their effectiveness as commerce raiders. It denied them the ability to maneuver freely on the surface. It turned every surfacing into a life-or-death gamble, and it broke the morale of the crews who had to face it. A post-war analysis by the United States Navy concluded that the Mark 24 was the most cost-effective anti-submarine weapon of World War II. Each torpedo cost approximately $3,600 to produce. Each U-boat it sank represented a German investment of over $2 million in construction costs alone, not counting the training of the crew, the fuel, the torpedoes, and the strategic value of removing an operational submarine from the battle. The return on investment was extraordinary, but here is the legacy that matters. The Mark 24 proved that technology could decisively shift the balance of naval warfare. It showed that a small, smart weapon could be more effective than massive firepower. It demonstrated that the side that innovates faster wins. Germany had the technological lead in submarine warfare in 1939, but by 1943, the Allies had leapfrogged them with weapons like the Mark 24 UR, and Germany never caught up. The acoustic homing torpedo became the standard for all modern anti-submarine weapons. Today, every major navy uses some form of acoustic homing torpedo. They are faster, smarter, and far more lethal than the Mark 24. But the core concept remains the same. Listen for the target, track the sound, follow until impact. The Mark 24 pioneered that approach, and in doing so, it changed naval warfare forever. So here is my question for you. Knowing that a single technological innovation, the Mark II-4, helped turn the tide of the Battle of the Atlantic, do you think the outcome of World War II was determined more by industrial capacity or by technological innovation? Could Germany have won if they had developed the acoustic torpedo first? Or was the sheer scale of Allied production always going to overwhelm them? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now. I want to see this debated. If this changed how you understand the Battle of the Atlantic and the role of technology in warfare, hit that like button and subscribe for more history that reveals the weapons and tactics that actually decided the war.